A man stands before Congress in 1842, demonstrating a machine that will change human civilization forever. He taps out a message, and 40 miles away it appears instantly. Impossible, they whisper, witchcraft. Yet Samuel Morse isn't a wizard. He's a portrait painter who stumbled into inventing the telegraph almost by accident, after tragedy destroyed everything he thought his life would be. The story you think you know about Morse is wrong. He didn't wake up one day and invent instant communication. He spent years as a struggling artist, watching his wife die while he painted portraits of the wealthy, unaware she was gone, until days after her burial. That moment shattered him, and from that shattering came an obsession that would wire the world. April 27th, 1791, Charlestown, Massachusetts. The Morse household welcomes their first child into a world that moves at the speed of horses. A letter from Boston to New York takes days. News from Europe arrives weeks late, sometimes months. Information travels as it has for millennia, carried by hand, by hoof, by sail. Jedediah Morse looks down at his newborn son and sees potential. He's a Congregationalist minister, but not just any minister. Jedediah is known as the father of American geography, author of textbooks that define how Americans understand their expanding nation. He's a man of precision, of facts, of systems. He'll raise his son Samuel with the same exacting standards. The house on the hill in Charlestown is strict, discipline above all. Young Samuel grows up with books, with expectations, with the constant weight of his father's reputation. Jedediah believes in education through rigor. No coddling, no softness. The boy will learn Latin and Greek. He'll master mathematics. He'll become a minister, naturally. What else would a Morse become? But Samuel's hands have other ideas. While other boys his age memorize scripture, Samuel draws. On every scrap of paper he can find, he sketches. The margins of his school books fill with faces, with landscapes, with careful observations of the world around him. His father finds this frivolous, worse than frivolous, dangerous. Art is vanity, art is distraction from serious purpose. At 14, Samuel enters Yale College. It's 1805, and Yale is still finding its identity, still shaking off its purely theological origins. Samuel studies under Benjamin Silliman, one of America's first science professors. Here's where something crucial happens, something that will echo decades later in ways no one can predict. Silliman demonstrates electricity, not the tame electricity of modern classrooms, but the wild, mysterious force that scientists are only beginning to understand. He shows how electrical current can travel through wires, how it can be controlled, directed, made to do work. The students watch fascinated as sparks jump through the darkness. Samuel Morse sits in that lecture hall, 17 years old, watching electricity dance. He has no idea this moment will define his life. Right now, he's more interested in painting miniature portraits on ivory to earn spending money. The other students love his work. For $5, he'll capture your likeness in exquisite detail. He's good. Better than good. This is what his hands were meant to do. His father doesn't see it that way. Letters arrive at Yale filled with concern. Guard against the allurements of the imagination. Remember your higher calling. Art is fine as a hobby, but you must prepare for serious work. Jedediah Morse has plans for his son, and those plans don't include paintbrushes, but something in Samuel has awakened. When he paints, the world makes sense in a way it never does in theology class. The careful observation required, the translation of three-dimensional reality onto flat surface, the capture of personality in pigment and line. This is his language. This is where he excels. Graduation approaches. Samuel is 20 years old, and the gulf between his father's expectations and his own desires has become a chasm. He doesn't want to be a minister. He wants to paint. The thought of telling his father this makes him physically ill. The compromise, when it comes, is fragile. Jedediah agrees to let Samuel work as a clerk in a Boston bookstore. It's respectable, commercial, not quite ministry, but not quite the disaster of full-time artistry. Samuel accepts because he has to. He's 20, broke, and dependent on his father's goodwill. The bookstore is a prison. Day after day, Samuel stands behind the counter, selling volumes to customers while his own dreams gather dust. He draws in stolen moments, quick sketches hidden from his employer. At night, in his cramped room, he paints by candlelight. His talent grows even as his frustration mounts. Then fate intervenes in the form of Washington Allston. Allston is everything Samuel dreams of becoming, an American painter who has studied in London, who has seen the great masters, who makes his living through art. When Allston sees Samuel's work, he doesn't offer polite encouragement. He sees genuine ability. "You should study in England," Allston tells him, "at the Royal Academy. That's where real painters are made." The idea is absurd. Samuel has no money. His father would never approve. England is across an ocean, months away, a world apart from everything he knows. It's impossible. Samuel writes to his father anyway. The letter is carefully crafted, mixing filial duty with desperate ambition. He argues that art can be noble, that history painting, the highest form of the art, depicts biblical and moral scenes, that he could use his talent in service of higher ideals. He's asking permission to follow his dream while framing it in language his minister father might accept. Jedediah's response arrives weeks later. To Samuel's shock, it's yes, conditional, hedged with warnings and expectations. But yes, his parents will scrape together $300. Washington Allston will chaperone the journey. Samuel will study at the Royal Academy. He'll have his chance. July 1811. Samuel Morse boards a ship bound for Liverpool. He's 20 years old, has never left New England, and is about to cross the Atlantic toward everything he's ever wanted. The voyage takes 6 weeks. 6 weeks of rolling seas and close quarters, of anticipation mixed with terror. What if he fails? What if his talent isn't enough? What if his father was right all along? London explodes around him. After provincial Boston, the city is overwhelming. 500,000 people crammed into streets that have stood for centuries. The Royal Academy, Somerset House, the exhibitions where the greatest artists in the British Empire display their work. Samuel walks these halls with his mouth open, his sketchbook clutched in trembling hands. The Academy accepts him. He'll study under Benjamin West, an American-born painter who has become one of Britain's most successful artists. West is president of the Royal Academy, painter to King George III, a living example that Americans can succeed in the highest reaches of art. Samuel throws himself into work with desperate intensity. He's not just learning to paint, he's learning to see the human figure in all its complexity, the way light falls on flesh, the architecture of bone and muscle beneath skin. He draws from classical sculptures. He paints from live models. He absorbs technique like a man dying of thirst. Money is constantly tight. His parents send what they can, but it's never enough. London is expensive, supplies cost money, and Samuel discovers he has champagne tastes on a water budget. He eats cheap food, lives in shabby rooms, and pours every penny into his art. The work pays off. In 1813, his painting, The Dying Hercules, wins a gold medal from the Society of Arts. He's 22 years old, and suddenly people are paying attention. This American boy might actually have something. But England is at war. The War of 1812 has turned Britain and America into enemies, and London is no place for a young American. Samuel should go home. His money is running out anyway. Yet he lingers, desperate to absorb every last lesson, every last opportunity to study the masters. He visits galleries obsessively. The National Gallery, private collections, anywhere he can see the work of Raphael, Michelangelo, Titian. He makes copies, studying their techniques, trying to understand how they achieve their effects. His own work grows more confident, more sophisticated. Finally, in 1815, with Napoleon defeated and the war over, Samuel boards a ship for home. He's been gone 4 years. He's no longer the uncertain boy who left Boston. He's a trained artist, medal-winning, confident in his abilities. He's ready to become America's great painter. America has other plans. The United States, in 1815, doesn't want history paintings. It wants portraits. Wealthy merchants and politicians want their likenesses captured. But grand allegorical scenes of classical heroes? Nobody's buying. Samuel discovers this harsh truth immediately. He sets up a studio in Boston, advertising his services. He'll paint portraits, yes, but he really wants to do important work. History painting, biblical scenes, the kind of art that elevates the soul and secures a reputation. He paints the Judgment of Jupiter, a massive canvas depicting classical mythology. It's technically brilliant. Nobody wants it. The rejection stings. After years of study, after the gold medal and the praise in London, he's back where he started. A portrait painter, a craftsman for hire. It feels like failure, but portraits pay, so portraits he paints. He's actually quite good at them. He has a gift for capturing personality, for making his subjects look dignified and important without obvious flattery. Word spreads, commissions arrive. He paints merchants, politicians, their wives, their children. The money isn't great, but it's something. He moves to Concord, New Hampshire, chasing commissions. Then Charleston, South Carolina, following the money south. The life of an itinerant portrait painter is unstable, lonely, filled with long stretches away from home. But Samuel is building a reputation. And in Charleston, something else happens. Her name is Lucretia Pickering Walker. She's the daughter of a wealthy merchant, beautiful and cultured, exactly the kind of woman an ambitious young artist should marry. Samuel falls hard. After years of solitary focus on his art, he discovers he wants more. He wants a home, a family, a life beyond his studio. They marry on September 29th, 1818. Samuel is 27, finally feeling like his life is taking shape. He has a wife he adores. His portrait business is growing. Maybe he won't be the great history painter he dreamed of becoming, but he can make a good life. He can be successful in a different way. They settle in Charleston. Commissions keep coming. In 1819, Lucretia gives birth to their first child, a daughter they named Susan. Samuel paints his wife and child, capturing a moment of domestic happiness. The portrait shows a young father's pride, a husband's love. Everything he's worked for seems within reach. But Charleston's summers are brutal. The heat, the humidity, and something worse, disease. Yellow fever sweeps through the coastal cities every summer, killing hundreds. The wealthy flee to cooler climates. Samuel takes his young family back north, to his parents' home in New Haven, where they'll be safe. The pattern establishes itself. Winter in Charleston, painting portraits. Summer in New Haven with family. It's not ideal, the constant moving, but it works. Samuel is making decent money. His reputation grows. In 1822, Lucretia gives birth to their second child, a son named Charles. The family's growing. Samuel receives a commission that will change everything. The city fathers of Charleston want a full-length portrait of President James Monroe. This is prestigious work, the kind that could establish Samuel as more than just another portrait painter. He accepts immediately. The painting takes months. Samuel pours everything he knows into it. Monroe in full presidential dignity, every detail perfect. When it's finished, it's widely praised. Samuel Morse is now the artist who painted the president. Doors are opening. He moves his family to New York City in 1823. New York is growing, becoming America's commercial center, and wealthy New Yorkers need their portraits painted. Samuel rents a house on Canal Street. He sets up a proper studio. This is it. This is where he'll finally establish himself. The work comes steadily. New York's elite sit for him. He paints merchants and mayors, society women, and their daughters. The money is better than it's ever been. Lucretia is happy. The children are healthy. After years of struggle, Samuel Morse has built the life he wanted. Then he receives a letter that will destroy everything. A commission in Washington, D.C. Important work that could lead to more government contracts. He should take it. It's only a few weeks. Lucretia and the children will be fine in New York. He leaves on February 7th, 1825. He has no way of knowing that he'll never see his wife alive again. The letter arrives in Washington on February 10th, 1825. 3 days after Samuel left New York. 3 days that felt routine, filled with preliminary sketches and meetings about the commission. 3 ordinary days. The handwriting on the envelope is his father's. That's odd. His father rarely writes unless something's wrong. Samuel breaks the seal. The words hit him like a physical blow. Lucretia is dead. She died suddenly. February 7th, the same day Samuel left for Washington. Heart failure, they think, though no one's certain. She was 25 years old. She went to bed feeling unwell and never woke up. The funeral was yesterday. She's already buried. Samuel reads the letter again and again, trying to make the words mean something different, but they don't change. His wife is dead, has been dead for 3 days while he sat in Washington discussing paint and canvas and composition, while he ate dinner, while he slept. She was already in the ground by the time her death reached him. He leaves immediately, abandons the commission, throws his belongings into a trunk, catches the first coach north. The journey takes days. Every mile is torture. He should have been there, should have been holding her hand, should have said goodbye. Instead, he was chasing another commission, another portrait, another chance to prove himself. When he reaches New York, the house on Canal Street feels like a tomb. His children, Susan age 6 and Charles age 3, don't fully understand why Papa came home, but Mama didn't wake up. Samuel's mother-in-law has been caring for them. She hands Samuel a miniature portrait he'd painted of Lucretia years earlier. This tiny painting is all he has left of her face. The grief is catastrophic. Samuel stops painting, can't pick up a brush, can't think about light and shadow and capturing likeness when the face he most wanted to capture is gone forever. He failed her, failed as a husband. He chose work over family, and she died alone. Weeks pass in a fog. Friends try to help. They remind him he has children who need him, a career to maintain, obligations. But Samuel can barely function. He writes to his father, "My affliction I know has been great, and I bow with reverence and submission to the will of him who gave her to me, and who had a right to take her away." The words sound proper, resigned. They're lies. Samuel isn't resigned. He's drowning in rage and guilt. Why did he go to Washington? The commission wasn't that important. Nothing was that important. He could have been there, could have called a better doctor, could have done something. He forces himself back to work after 6 weeks, not because he wants to, but because he has 2 children and rent to pay. The brush feels foreign in his hand. The act of mixing colours, of caring about whether a nose is precisely right, seems absurd, but he paints, portrait after portrait, mechanical, professional, empty. But grief does something unexpected to Samuel Morse. It transforms him. The man who returns to his easel after Lucretia's death is different, harder, more driven. If art couldn't prevent loss, if success couldn't protect the people he loved, then maybe it was time to aim higher, to want more, to make his mark so permanently that loss itself couldn't erase it. In 1826, a group of artists, including Samuel, found the National Academy of Design. It's America's answer to the European academies, a place where artists can exhibit, teach, and elevate American art beyond provincial portrait painting. Samuel throws himself into the organization, serves as its first president, gives lectures, organizes exhibitions, fights for the recognition of American artists. He takes his children to live with relatives. He can't care for them properly while building his career. It's another failure, another guilt, but necessary. Susan and Charles will be raised by family who can give them stability. Samuel will visit when he can. Another sacrifice on the altar of ambition. And then in 1829, something changes. Samuel receives an invitation that will alter the trajectory of his entire life. A group of wealthy New Yorkers is funding a grand tour of Europe for promising American artists. 3 years abroad to study the masters, to see the great galleries, to elevate their craft. It's what Samuel's been dreaming of since Yale. The chance his father denied him 20 years ago. He's 40 now, too old perhaps for artistic pilgrimages, but he accepts immediately. His children are settled. His portrait business can wait. This might be his last chance to become the painter he always believed he could be. Samuel sails for Liverpool in November 1829. The Atlantic crossing takes 3 weeks. He stands on deck watching America disappear behind him, wondering if he's running away or running towards something. Maybe both. Europe will have answers. Europe will transform him. He's certain of it. He lands in England first. London overwhelms him. The scale of everything, the history, the sheer accumulation of centuries. He visits the National Gallery, sees paintings he's only known through engravings, stands before works by Raphael, Titian, Rembrandt. The technical mastery leaves him breathless and discouraged in equal measure. These men were giants. What is he? A provincial portrait painter from a country without artistic tradition. But he studies, sketches, takes notes, analyses composition and colour. He's 40, but he approaches this like a student. Humble before masters, he'll never equal, but determined to learn everything he can. He travels to Paris in 1830. The city is in political upheaval. The July Revolution is unfolding in the streets. Charles X is being overthrown. Samuel watches history happen, sees barricades go up, hears gunfire, witnesses the birth of a new government. He sketches the chaos trying to capture revolution in charcoal and paper. But Paris also offers something else, the Louvre. Samuel haunts the galleries. He conceives an ambitious project. He'll paint a single canvas showing the Louvre's Salon Carré, the gallery's most famous room, with dozens of masterpieces visible at once. It'll be a painting of paintings. A way to bring European art back to America for people who'll never cross the Atlantic. He sets up his easel in the Louvre and begins the most ambitious work of his life. The painting takes months. He works from morning until the light fails, captures miniature versions of 38 masterpieces within a single canvas. Titian's Francis I, Veronese's Wedding at Cana, works by Rubens and Rembrandt and Raphael, all painstakingly reproduced. He adds small figures of visitors viewing the paintings, including himself teaching a young woman to appreciate art. It's brilliant, ambitious, exactly the kind of history painting he's always wanted to create. When it's finished, Samuel knows it's the best thing he's ever done. This will prove he's more than a portrait painter. This will establish his reputation. He travels to Italy, Rome, Florence, Venice, sees Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel, stands before the Pietà, walks streets where Raphael walked. He's supposed to feel inspired. Instead, he feels the weight of history crushing him. These men were chosen, touched by genius. What is Samuel Morse? A competent craftsman. Nothing more. He meets other American artists abroad. They're all chasing the same dream, trying to become great in the shadow of the dead masters. Most will fail. Return home to portrait commissions and teaching positions. The lucky ones will be remembered for a generation. Then forgotten? Samuel stays in Europe for 3 years. He paints, studies, absorbs everything he can, but something's changing inside him. The certainty he felt at 20 is gone. He's 43 when he finally boards a ship back to America in 1832. He's bringing with him his masterpiece, the Louvre painting that will finally prove his worth. He's bringing experience and knowledge and refined technique. What he doesn't know is that the voyage home will change everything. That something will happen on that ship that will redirect his entire life away from art towards something he can't yet imagine. That the painter Samuel Morse is about to disappear, replaced by someone else entirely. The ship is called the Sully. It departs from Le Havre on October 1st, 1832. The passenger manifest includes Samuel Morse, artist, age 41, and a collection of people he'll get to know over the next 7 weeks at sea. Among them is a man named Charles Thomas Jackson, a Boston physician returning from medical studies in Paris. Jackson is brilliant, restless, the kind of man who dabbles in everything: medicine, chemistry, geology. He's seen demonstrations of electromagnetism in Paris, the new science that's fascinating European researchers. He can't stop talking about it. The passengers gather each evening in the ship's salon. There's not much to do on an Atlantic crossing except talk. The conversations range widely: politics, philosophy, art. But Jackson keeps returning to electricity. He's obsessed with a recent discovery: that electrical current can travel instantaneously through wire, no matter how long. Samuel listens politely at first. He's not a scientist. Electricity is interesting but abstract. He's thinking about his Louvre painting stored in the hold below, about how he'll exhibit it in New York, about finally receiving the recognition he deserves. But Jackson keeps talking, describes experiments he witnessed in Paris, how electrical signals could be sent through miles of wire in an instant, how the presence or absence of current could be detected, how it all happens faster than any messenger on horseback could travel. And then someone asks the question that changes everything. If electricity travels instantly through wire, could it carry messages? Could you send information from one place to another without physical transportation? Samuel Morse sits up straighter. His mind is suddenly racing. Messages, instant communication. A letter that arrives the moment it's sent. News that travels at the speed of thought rather than the speed of horses. He's thinking about that letter from his father, the one that told him Lucretia was dead 3 days after it happened. 3 days he could never recover. 3 days that defined his failure as a husband. What if that letter had arrived instantly? What if distance didn't mean delay? What if you could know, could act, could be present, even when you were far away? Samuel asks Jackson questions. How does it work? What's required? Jackson explains the principles. It's simple, really. Current flows or doesn't flow. Presence or absence. On or off. You'd need a way to encode messages into this binary language. A system where different patterns meant different things. Samuel's mind is spinning. He's an artist. He thinks in symbols, in visual language, in systems of representation. This is just another code, another way of translating thought into form. His training hasn't been wasted. It's been preparation for this. He barely sleeps that night. His cabin is small and dark, and he lies in his bunk seeing possibilities. A network of wires connecting cities, messages flying between them instantly. Commerce accelerated, news travelling at unprecedented speed. Lives saved because help could be summoned immediately. Families connected across distance. Everything changes. Everything. The next morning, Samuel finds Jackson and presses him for more details. Jackson is happy to oblige. He's full of theoretical knowledge, but no practical application. He's interested in the science for its own sake. Samuel is interested in making it work. Over the following weeks, as the Sully crosses the Atlantic, Samuel fills notebooks with sketches and ideas. Not paintings this time. Diagrams, mechanical drawings, systems. He's designing something, though he doesn't yet know exactly what. A machine that could send electrical signals, a code that could represent letters, a way to make the theoretical real. The Louvre painting sits forgotten in the hold, the masterpiece that was supposed to define his career. Samuel has found something bigger, something that matters in a way art never could. He's found a way to defeat distance itself. The Sully docks in New York in November 1832. Samuel Morse steps onto American soil, carrying notebooks full of diagrams and a mind blazing with purpose. He's 41 years old. He's been painting for 2 decades with modest success. Now he's about to abandon everything he knows for a technology that doesn't exist yet. His family doesn't understand. His brothers, prosperous and practical, look at his electrical sketches with confusion. Why would a painter care about wires and batteries? Samuel tries to explain, but the words come out tangled. It's about communication, about connection, about making distance irrelevant. They nod politely and change the subject. He needs money. He needs equipment. He needs time to experiment. But he has students to teach, commissions to complete, a reputation to maintain. The Yale professorship barely pays enough to survive. He paints portraits he doesn't care about to fund experiments that consume him. His workspace becomes a laboratory. Canvases lean against walls, gathering dust. The smell of oil paint gives way to the acrid tang of battery acid. He winds copper wire around wooden frames. He constructs crude electromagnets. He reads everything he can find about electrical theory, which isn't much. Most of it is in French or German. Languages he barely understands. The basic principle is straightforward. Electricity flowing through wire creates a magnetic field. That field can move metal. A switch at one end controls the current. A detector at the other responds to its presence or absence. Simple. But making it work reliably is something else entirely. His first attempts are disasters. The current is too weak to travel any distance. The batteries drain too quickly. The electromagnets barely move. The whole apparatus is a mess of wire and wood that does nothing useful. Months pass, then a year. He's not the only one chasing this idea. Other inventors across America and Europe are working on electrical telegraphs. But Samuel has an advantage they don't. He thinks like an artist. He understands that the machine is only half the problem. The other half is language. How do you encode the alphabet into electrical pulses? Some inventors propose complex systems with multiple wires, one for each letter. 26 wires for 26 letters. It's absurdly impractical. Samuel knows there must be a simpler way. He's sitting in his cramped New York apartment one evening in 1835, staring at his notes by candlelight. 3 years since the Sully, 3 years of failure and frustration. He's broke. He's exhausted. He's 44 years old with nothing to show for decades of work. And then it clicks. Not multiple wires, one wire, not complex signals, simple ones. The presence of current and its absence. That's all you need, on and off, but arranged in patterns. Different patterns for different letters. A language made of dots and dashes. He starts with the simplest version. A short pulse, a long pulse, a gap. That's your entire vocabulary. Combine them in different ways and you can represent anything. 3 short pulses might be one letter. 3 long pulses another. A short, a long, and another short. The combinations are endless. But which combinations for which letters? Random assignment would work, but it's inefficient. Samuel thinks about frequency. Some letters appear more often than others in English. E is common. Z is rare. The common letters should have the shortest codes. The rare ones can be longer. He visits a printer's workshop and watches the typesetters work. Asks them which letters they use most. They show him their type cases. The compartments for E and T are largest because those letters are needed constantly. The compartments for Q and X are tiny. The physical arrangement of type reflects the statistical reality of language. Samuel translates this into his code. E becomes a single dot, the simplest, shortest signal. T becomes a single dash. The next most common letters get slightly longer combinations. The rare letters get longer sequences still. It's elegant, efficient. The code emerges from the structure of language itself. He calls it Morse code. Now he needs a machine that works. His early prototypes are crude. A lever that opens and closes a circuit. An electromagnet that responds by moving an arm. The arm holds a pencil that marks paper pulled beneath it by clockwork. When current flows, the magnet pulls the arm down and the pencil draws a line. When current stops, the arm lifts and the line breaks. Long lines, short lines, spaces between them, dashes and dots. He demonstrates it to anyone who will watch. Most are skeptical. Why would anyone need to send messages through wire when you can send them by mail? What's the practical application? Who would pay for this? Samuel knows the answer, but can't make them see it. Speed, that's what changes everything. A letter takes days or weeks. His telegraph takes seconds. When speed matters, when information is urgent, when lives or fortunes depend on knowing something now rather than later, the telegraph wins. But he needs proof. He needs a demonstration that shows the world what's possible. He needs distance. His apartment experiments use a few feet of wire. The real test requires miles. In 1837, he finally has a working prototype. It's ungainly and temperamental, but it functions. He demonstrates it at New York University, where he teaches. He sends signals across 200 feet of wire, strung through the building's halls. The audience watches the receiving machine mark paper with dots and dashes. They decode the message. It works. Some are impressed, most shrug. 200 feet isn't 200 miles. This is a toy, not a revolution. Samuel needs bigger backing, a real test, and that means government funding. He needs Congress. He travels to Washington in 1838, demonstrates his machine to committees and congressmen. Most are interested, but non-committal. They've seen inventors before, men with grand schemes and crude machines who promise transformation and deliver nothing. Why should Morse be different? Samuel persists. He writes letters, he lobbies, he demonstrates again and again. Meanwhile, he's still teaching, still painting portraits to eat, still scraping by while his dream consumes every spare moment and dollar. Years pass, 1839, 1840, 1841. Congress debates, committees review. Nothing happens. Samuel grows desperate. His youth is gone. His artistic career is dead. Everything depends on this machine, and nobody will fund it. Then in 1842, a breakthrough. Congress agrees to appropriate $30,000 for an experimental telegraph line between Washington and Baltimore. 40 miles. A real test, finally. The work begins in 1843. Samuel oversees the construction personally. They lay wire underground, in lead pipes at first, but that proves impractical. The pipes leak. The insulation fails. They switch to overhead wires strung on wooden poles. The whole country thinks it's insane. Wires hanging over roads and fields? It looks ridiculous. It will never work. Samuel knows better. He's tested the principles hundreds of times. The physics is sound. Current flows, signals travel. Distance doesn't matter. It's just a question of building it right. The line snakes from Washington north toward Baltimore. Crews string wire pole by pole. Samuel tests each section as it's completed. Sends signals, receives them, makes adjustments. The system grows more reliable with each iteration. By May 1844, the line is complete. 40 miles of wire connecting the Capitol building in Washington to the Mount Clair depot in Baltimore. The receiving station is set up in the Supreme Court chamber. Samuel sits at his transmitting key. His assistant, Alfred Vail, waits in Baltimore. The official demonstration is scheduled for May 24th. Congress will watch. The press will report. This is the moment that proves everything or destroys it. Samuel is 53 years old. He's been working on this for 12 years. The morning arrives. The chamber fills with politicians and journalists. Samuel sits at his machine, fingers resting on the brass key. Someone suggests he send something biblical, something momentous. He chooses a verse from Numbers. His finger presses the key. Current flows 40 miles to Baltimore. The electromagnet there responds. The receiving machine marks paper. Dots and dashes. The message is decoded. Vail sends a reply. The reply travels back to Washington. Samuel shows the paper to the assembled crowd. It works perfectly, instantly. A message sent and answered in seconds across 40 miles. What would have taken hours by horse has happened in moments. The room erupts. Not everyone is convinced. Some call it a trick. Others say it's interesting but impractical. Mail works fine. Why complicate things? The telegraph will never replace human messengers. It's too expensive, too fragile, too strange. But Samuel knows what he's seen. The future arriving through wire. He's opened a door that can never close. Information will now move at the speed of electricity. Everything that depends on knowing things quickly will transform. Commerce, journalism, government, war, everything. Within months, telegraph lines are being planned across America. Private companies form to string wire from city to city. The network spreads like roots through soil. New York to Philadelphia, Philadelphia to Pittsburgh, Pittsburgh to Cincinnati. Each connection makes the system more valuable. Each new line opens new possibilities. Samuel patents his system, licenses the technology. Finally, after decades of poverty, money flows. Not huge wealth at first, but enough. Enough to stop teaching. Enough to stop painting portraits of merchants and their wives. Enough to focus entirely on expanding the telegraph network. He's become famous, not as a painter, not as an artist, as an inventor. The newspapers call him the father of the telegraph. His name becomes synonymous with the technology. When people think of instant communication, they think of Samuel Morse. But fame brings complications. Other inventors claim they thought of it first. Legal battles erupt over patents and priority. Who really invented the telegraph? Morse, the German scientist Carl Friedrich Gauss, who experimented with electromagnetic signaling in the 1830s, the Englishman Charles Wheatstone, who built a working system around the same time. Samuel fights these battles in court for years. Some he wins, some he loses. The truth is messy. Multiple people had similar ideas simultaneously. The telegraph wasn't born from one man's genius. It emerged from the collective progress of electrical science. But Samuel's version worked best. His code was simplest. His machine was most reliable. That's what mattered. By 1850, telegraph wires connect every major American city. Messages fly between them constantly. Stock prices, news reports, business orders, personal messages. The speed of information has been revolutionized. What took weeks now takes minutes. People begin to understand what this means. A fire breaks out in one city and help can be summoned from another immediately. A criminal flees and his description travels faster than he can run. A business makes a decision in New York and its effects ripple to San Francisco before the day ends. Distance still exists physically, but informationally, it's collapsing. Samuel watches his creation spread and feels something strange. Not pure triumph, something more complicated. He thinks about Lucretia sometimes, about that letter from his father arriving 3 days late. If the telegraph had existed then, would things have been different? Would he have made it home in time? Probably not. The telegraph doesn't solve everything. It doesn't overcome human limitation or heal grief. It just makes certain kinds of information move faster. But maybe that's enough. Maybe those 3 days matter to someone else. Maybe somewhere a husband receives news in time. Maybe somewhere a life is saved because help arrives when it's needed. He's 60 years old now, wealthy, famous. The thing he built has changed the world. But at night, alone in his study, he sometimes takes out his old sketches. The ones from before the Sully. Landscapes, portraits, the rejected Louvre painting. Work he once thought would define him. It all seems distant now, like someone else's life. The telegraph consumed everything, made him what he became, but was it worth it? Would Lucretia have preferred the husband who painted rather than the inventor who changed history? There's no answer, only the strange ache of success built on loss. The wires hum with messages. The system expands, and Samuel Morse sits in rooms that should feel triumphant, wondering what he traded to get here. The telegraph is everywhere now, but Samuel Morse isn't done yet. There's one more distance to conquer, one that seems impossible even to him at first: the Atlantic Ocean. In 1854, a wealthy paper manufacturer named Cyrus Field approaches Morse with an idea that sounds insane. Run a telegraph cable along the ocean floor, from Newfoundland to Ireland. Connect America to Europe. Make instant communication between continents possible. Most engineers think it can't be done. The ocean is too deep. The cable would be too heavy. The signal would degrade over that distance. The water pressure would crush anything you tried to lay down there. It's a fantasy, a rich man's delusion. But Samuel remembers something. He remembers being told the telegraph itself was impossible, that electricity couldn't carry messages, that his code wouldn't work, that nobody would care about instant communication anyway. He tells Field yes, he'll help. Not with the engineering, he's not that kind of scientist, but with his name, his credibility, his endorsement of the project. Field organises a company, raises enormous amounts of capital, commissions the construction of specialised ships capable of carrying and laying thousands of miles of cable. The project takes years to prepare. The first attempt happens in 1857. Two ships meet in the middle of the Atlantic. They splice their cables together. Then they sail in opposite directions, paying out cable as they go. One toward Newfoundland, one toward Ireland. The cable snaps. All that wire sinks to the ocean floor. Hundreds of thousands of dollars disappear into the dark. They try again in 1858. This time, the cable holds. The ships reach their destinations. The cable is connected to telegraph stations on both sides of the ocean. Messages are sent. Queen Victoria transmits a greeting to President Buchanan. 98 words that take 16 hours to send because the signal is so weak. But it works. Europe and America are connected. Celebrations erupt. Newspapers proclaim a new era. Church bells ring. Parades fill the streets. Humanity has conquered the ocean itself. Distance no longer matters. The world has shrunk to nothing. Samuel attends banquets in his honour, gives speeches, accepts medals. He's 70 years old and being celebrated as the man who made it all possible. Then the cable stops working. 3 weeks after the first message, the signal dies completely. Something went wrong deep underwater where nobody can reach it. All those celebrations were premature. The Atlantic cable is dead. The failure is devastating. Investors lose fortunes. The company nearly collapses. Critics who said it was impossible feel vindicated. See, the ocean can't be conquered. Nature has limits that technology cannot overcome. But Cyrus Field doesn't quit. He spends years raising more money, commissioning better cable, designing improved ships, learning from the failure. In 1866, another attempt, this time with stronger cable, better insulation, more careful engineering. The ship Great Eastern, the largest vessel in the world, carries the entire cable on its own. No need to splice in the middle of the ocean. It works. The cable is laid successfully. Messages flow between continents, clearly and reliably. This time it doesn't fail. The world changes overnight. Stock prices in London affect trading in New York instantly. News from Europe reaches America within hours instead of weeks. Diplomatic communications that once took months now happen in real time. Wars can be coordinated across oceans. Treaties negotiated without delays. Samuel watches this happen from his home in New York. He doesn't travel anymore. Too old, too tired. But he reads the newspapers, sees the reports of messages flying across the Atlantic, knows that the thing he helped start has become something beyond what he imagined. He thinks about Lucretia again. Always Lucretia. That letter that arrived too late. If the telegraph had existed then, would it have helped? The telegraph can't make ships sail faster, can't make trains run through storms, can't cure illness or stop death. It just makes information move. That's all it ever did. But somehow that became everything. He receives visitors now, journalists who want to interview the famous inventor, young engineers who want to meet the father of the telegraph, politicians who want to be photographed with him. He tolerates it, plays the role, tells the stories they want to hear. But privately, he feels strange about his legacy. The telegraph was never supposed to be his life's work. It was supposed to be a side project, a way to make money so he could paint. Art was what mattered. Beauty, expression, the things that made life worth living. Instead, he became known for dots and dashes, for metal and wire, for something practical and useful, but not beautiful, not transcendent, not what he wanted to be remembered for. His old paintings hang in his home, the portraits, the landscapes, the biblical scenes he laboured over. Nobody looks at them anymore. Nobody cares. When people think of Samuel Morse, they don't think of those. They think of the code, the machine, the wires stretching across continents. He tells himself it's fine. That utility matters. That changing the world is worth more than making beautiful things. But late at night, looking at those paintings, he's not entirely sure. In 1871, artists and scientists gather in New York to honour him. A bronze statue is unveiled. Speeches are given. Everyone talks about his genius, his contribution to progress, his place in history as the man who made instant communication possible. Samuel sits in the front row, listening. He's 80 years old, white-haired, frail. The world he lives in is unrecognisable from the one he was born into. Telegraph wires connect cities and countries. Messages fly through them constantly. The speed of information has been revolutionized, and it all traces back to that moment on the Sully, that conversation about electromagnetism, that spark of an idea. If he'd stayed in his cabin that day, if he'd never asked those questions, would someone else have invented the telegraph? Probably, eventually, but it wouldn't have been him. His life would have been completely different. Would it have been better? There's no way to know. The person he might have been, the painter who stayed a painter, doesn't exist. Only this version is real. The inventor, the famous man, the one who changed the world. The ceremony ends. People congratulate him, shake his hand, thank him for his contributions. He smiles, says the right things, plays the role they expect, but inside he feels the weight of it. All those years, all that work, the things he sacrificed, the life he didn't live, the art he didn't make, Lucretia's absence, the children who grew up barely knowing him because he was always working, always expanding the network, always fighting patent battles, always being Samuel Morse, the inventor, instead of Samuel Morse, the human being. Was it worth it? The question has no answer. Worth is measured against alternatives that don't exist. He did what he did. The world is what it is. You can't unmake choices or relive years differently. He goes home, sits in his study, looks at his old sketches, the ones from before everything changed. They seem like artifacts from another life, proof that a different version of him once existed, someone who cared about beauty more than utility, who wanted to make art instead of change the world. That person is gone now, replaced by this. An old man in a room full of honours and memories, famous, successful, important, but alone with ghosts. The telegraph wires hum outside. Messages fly through them. Business, news, personal communications. Little fragments of human life transmitted as electrical pulses. The world talking to itself at the speed of lightning. Samuel Morse made that possible. He'll be remembered for it long after he's gone. His name will survive. His invention will shape the future. Everything he wanted as a young artist, recognition and importance and lasting impact, he achieved. Just not in the way he expected. He picks up a pencil, starts sketching. Nothing important, just lines on paper. The motion is familiar, comforting. For a moment, he's not the famous inventor. He's just a man drawing, trying to capture something. Light, form, the way things look when you pay attention. The sketch won't matter. Nobody will see it. It won't hang in a gallery or be remembered by history. But it's his, made for its own sake. Not because it's useful, or revolutionary, or important. Just because he wanted to make it. Outside the window, the city moves. Telegraph wires connect buildings. Messages fly invisibly through them. The system he built keeps working, growing, spreading. But in this room, for this moment, Samuel Morse is just drawing. And maybe that's enough. Maybe after everything, after all the fame and success and world-changing invention, this is what matters. The small private act, the thing done for itself. He finishes the sketch, sets it aside. It's not very good. He's out of practice. His hand isn't steady anymore. But it exists. He made it. And for reasons he can't quite articulate, that feels important in a way the telegraph never did. The light fades, evening comes. The city outside grows dark except for gas lamps and windows. Telegraph offices stay open late. Messages still need to be sent. The world doesn't stop just because the sun goes down. Samuel sits in the dimness, thinking about everything and nothing. The life he lived, the one he didn't, the choices that led here, the accidents and decisions and moments that made him who he became. Tomorrow there will be more visitors, more interviews, more celebrations of his achievement. He'll smile and play the role and let people believe whatever they want about him. The genius inventor, the man who changed everything, the father of modern communication. But tonight he's just tired. An old man in a room full of memories, looking at sketches nobody will see, wondering about roads not taken, feeling the weight of a life lived mostly in service to one idea, one invention, one claim to immortality. The telegraph was supposed to be temporary, a way to fund his real work. Instead it became everything, consumed his time, defined his legacy, made him famous for something he never intended to be famous for. He doesn't regret it exactly. Regret implies wishing you'd chosen differently. But he doesn't know what he would have chosen. The moment on the Sully happened. The idea came. Everything followed from that. You can't regret fate or accident, or the way one thing leads to another, until suddenly your whole life has been determined by a conversation you barely remember having. The room grows darker. Samuel doesn't light a lamp. He sits in the shadows. The sounds of the city drift through the window. Voices, carriage wheels, the distant clatter of the telegraph offices still operating. His legacy is secure. The invention works. The system spreads. History will remember him. Everything he worked for has been achieved. So why does it feel incomplete? Why does success taste like something else? Why do these old sketches matter more than they should? There are no answers, only questions that echo in empty rooms. Only the strange mathematics of a life where gaining everything somehow means losing something you can't quite name. The telegraph keeps humming, messages keep flying, the world keeps shrinking, and Samuel Morse sits alone with ghosts and might-have-beens, wondering what it all added up to, wondering if the thing he built was worth the person he stopped being. The morning comes anyway. It always does. Samuel wakes stiff and cold. He'd fallen asleep in the chair. His neck aches. The sketches lie scattered on the floor, where they slipped from his lap during the night. He bends slowly to gather them. Each movement is a negotiation with a body that no longer cooperates the way it used to. Outside, the city is already awake. Carts rolling, voices calling, the ordinary machinery of daily life grinding forward without pause. He stands at the window, looking down at people who have no idea who he is. Anonymous faces moving through their routines. Going to work, buying bread, living small lives that will leave no mark on history. Is that better or worse? He genuinely doesn't know anymore. A knock at the door. His housekeeper enters with breakfast. She sets the tray down, asks if he needs anything. He says no. She leaves. The food sits untouched. He's not hungry. Hasn't been for weeks. The telegraph office downtown will be busy already. Morning messages from Europe arriving through the transatlantic cable. Business communications, news dispatches, personal telegrams. Thousands of words flowing through copper wires every hour. His invention working exactly as designed. He should feel proud. He does feel proud. And yet, there's a letter on the breakfast tray from the National Academy of Design. They want to honour him. A special ceremony. Recognition of his contributions to American art before his work in telegraphy. It's a kindness, a gesture acknowledging the painter he used to be. He reads it twice, then sets it aside. The ceremony will happen whether he attends or not. They'll give speeches, talk about his early promise, his portraits, his historical paintings. They'll frame it as the foundation for everything that came after. As if the art led naturally to the invention. As if it all fits together in some coherent narrative. But that's not how it happened. The art and the telegraph aren't connected. They're separate, competing. One consumed the other. There's no through line except the person who did both, and even that person feels discontinuous. The man who painted is not the man who invented. They happen to share a name and a body, nothing more. He thinks about writing back, declining politely, but what would be the point? Let them have their ceremony. Let them believe what they need to believe. The past is whatever story we tell about it anyway. The day stretches ahead, empty hours to fill with nothing in particular. He could work on patents, review licensing agreements, correspond with telegraph companies, handle the business of being Samuel Morse, or he could paint. The thought arrives unbidden, unwelcome almost. Paint what? For whom? To what purpose? He's 81 years old. His hands shake. His eyes are weak. The art world has moved on without him. The Hudson River School painters are dying off. New movements have emerged. Impressionism, realism, styles that make his historical paintings look ancient. But the thought persists. Not painting for exhibition, not painting for sale or recognition. Just painting because once, a very long time ago, that's what he did. That's who he was. He walks to the closet, opens it. His old painting supplies are still there, pushed to the back, covered in dust, brushes stiff with dried paint, canvases warped and cracked, pigments hardened in their tubes, the physical remnants of an abandoned life. He pulls out a canvas, medium size. The surface is yellowed with age but still usable. He carries it to the window, sets it on an easel he hasn't touched in decades. The wood creaks, the joints are loose but it holds. What to paint? He has no commission, no subject assigned by a patron, no historical scene to recreate. For the first time in his painting career, he's completely free to choose. The irony is sharp. Freedom came only after he stopped. He looks out the window. The street below. Buildings, sky. Nothing dramatic or significant, just the view from his room. The world as it is on an ordinary Tuesday morning. He begins to sketch with charcoal, rough lines, the shapes of buildings, the angle of the street. His hand is unsteady. The lines wobble. It doesn't look like much, but something in him settles as he works, some long dormant part waking up. The hours pass without notice. He's not thinking about telegraphy or fame or legacy. He's thinking about light and shadow, about how to represent depth on a flat surface, about the technical problems of painting that once consumed his attention completely. When he finally steps back, the canvas is still mostly blank. A few lines, some rough blocking. Nothing anyone would call a painting, but it's a start. The first start in 40 years. He cleans the brushes, mixes paint. The motions come back slowly. Muscle memory from decades ago surfacing through layers of disuse. He's clumsy, uncertain, but he's painting, actually painting, not just thinking about it or remembering it, doing it. The light shifts. Afternoon. He hasn't eaten, hasn't noticed the time passing. His back aches from standing. His eyes hurt from focusing, but there's something on the canvas now. Shapes, colours, not good, not finished, but present, real. A different knock at the door, not the housekeeper, firmer, more insistent. He covers the canvas with a cloth, some instinct making him hide it, protecting this small private thing from outside judgment. The door opens. It's his son, Edward, grown now, middle-aged, successful in his own right. He looks concerned. "Father, you didn't answer my letters." Samuel realizes he hasn't checked his mail in days, maybe weeks. Time has become fluid, unreliable. "I've been busy," he says. Edward glances around the room, at the sketches on the floor, the covered canvas, the smell of turpentine. His expression is complicated, worry mixed with something else, pity perhaps. "Are you painting again?" The question hangs there, simple words containing so much weight. "I don't know what I'm doing," Samuel says, which is true in more ways than one. Edward sits. They talk about nothing important. Family news, business matters, the weather, surface conversation that fills space without meaning. Eventually Edward leaves. He's worried but doesn't know what to do with that worry. How do you help someone who has everything and feels like it's nothing? Alone again. Samuel uncovers the canvas, looks at what he's made. It's terrible, objectively bad. The proportions are wrong. The perspective is off. The colours don't work. If he submitted this to an Academy jury, they'd reject it without discussion. And yet he wants to keep going. Not because he thinks he can make something good. Not because anyone will see it or care. But because the act itself matters. The doing. The engagement with materials and vision. And the attempt to make something from nothing. Yeah, this is what he'd forgotten. What got lost in patents and business and fame. The simple satisfaction of making. Not for applause or money or historical significance. Just making because you're a person who makes things. He paints until the light fails, then lights lamps and paints more. The room grows cold. He doesn't notice. He's inside the work now, inside the problem, trying to solve how to represent what he sees with the tools he has. It doesn't work. The painting is still bad, getting worse probably. But that's not the point. The point is that he's trying. That some part of him that went dormant is functioning again. Creating, struggling, alive. When he finally stops, it's late. The city outside is dark except for scattered lights. Telegraph offices still operating. Messages still flying through wires he invented. The world still using his technology. But in this room, for these hours, none of that existed. There was only paint and canvas and the effort to see clearly and represent honestly. The simplest, hardest thing. The thing he used to do before everything changed. He sleeps better that night. Dreams of colours rather than wires. Wakes feeling something he hasn't felt in years. Not happiness exactly, but purpose, direction. The sense that his time means something beyond maintenance of past achievements. The days that follow establish a pattern. Morning correspondence. Business handled quickly. Then painting. Hours of it. Canvas after canvas. All bad, all private, all necessary. He tells no one what he's doing. When visitors come, he covers the work. When family asks how he spends his time, he's vague. This part of his life is his alone. Not for public consumption. Not for judgment or evaluation. Just his. The paintings pile up. Street scenes. Still lifes. Portraits of nobody in particular. He's teaching himself again. Relearning skills he let atrophy. Finding out what he can still do and what's lost forever. Some days the frustration is overwhelming. His hands won't do what his mind sees. The gap between vision and execution is vast, unbridgeable maybe. He wants to quit. Throw the brushes away, accept that this part of his life is over. But he doesn't. He keeps painting, because quitting would mean accepting that the telegraph is all he was, all he'll ever be, and something in him refuses that conclusion. The National Academy ceremony happens without him. He sends regrets, claims illness. They give the award anyway, posthumously almost, honouring the ghost of the painter he used to be. He reads about it in the newspaper, feels nothing. More letters arrive, more honours, more requests for interviews and appearances. The world wants Samuel Morse, the inventor, the genius, the man who changed communication forever. They don't want this old painter struggling with bad canvases in a room nobody sees. He understands. He's not bitter, but he also doesn't care anymore what they want. For the first time in decades, he's doing something solely because he wants to, not because it will succeed, not because it matters to history, just because. Winter comes, the room grows cold, he paints in fingerless gloves, his breath visible. The paint takes longer to dry. He works around the limitations, adapts, continues. The telegraph keeps expanding. New lines, new companies, new applications. His invention evolving beyond anything he imagined, creating industries, changing commerce, connecting continents. The impact is undeniable, world historical, permanent. And in a room in New York, an old man paints pictures nobody will ever see, pictures that don't matter. That change nothing. That will probably be thrown away after he dies. He paints them anyway, because they're his, because the making is the point. Because 40 years ago, he stopped being a painter to become an inventor. And now, at the end, he's trying to remember who he was before the telegram arrived and changed everything. The canvases are still bad. They're not getting better. He's too old, too out of practice. The skills are gone. But that's okay. He's not painting for quality. He's painting for the same reason he used to. Because something in him needs to make things. Needs to struggle with vision and material. Needs to try even knowing failure is certain. This is what the telegraph took. Not time or fame or even art career. It took the permission to fail. The freedom to make things that don't work. The space to be bad at something and do it anyway. Success demanded perfection. Invention required results. But painting, real painting, is mostly failure, mostly attempts that miss, mostly the gap between what you see and what you make. He'd forgotten that the struggle itself is the point, that making bad art is still making art, that the person who tries and fails is more alive than the person who succeeds and stops. The year ends, another begins. Samuel Morse, famous inventor, celebrated genius, father of the electric telegraph, paints his terrible paintings in a room nobody enters, and for the first time in 40 years he feels like himself. The problem with success is it makes you visible, and visibility changes what you can do. Early 1870. Samuel Morse is 79 years old. The telegraph has made him rich beyond anything he imagined as a young painter. The money keeps coming, royalties from patents, dividends from telegraph companies, income from investments made possible by telegraph wealth. He could live anywhere, do anything, but he stays in New York, in the same house, painting the same bad paintings nobody sees. The difference now is the world won't leave him alone. Letters arrive daily, inventors seeking advice, entrepreneurs wanting endorsements, cities wanting him to speak at openings of new telegraph lines, universities offering honorary degrees, foreign governments extending invitations. Everyone wants a piece of the famous inventor. Everyone has plans for how he should spend his remaining years. He declines almost everything, sends polite refusals, pleads age and health. But some obligations are inescapable. Some requests come with too much pressure to refuse. The French government wants to award him the Legion of Honor, the highest civilian decoration in France, established by Napoleon, given to perhaps 50 people per year. They're insisting he come to Paris to receive it in person. His friends tell him he has to go. This isn't like the American awards he can skip. This is France, the nation that embraced him as a young artist, that gave him his only real success as a painter. Refusing would be an insult, diplomatic incident, international embarrassment. So he goes, against every instinct, against the quiet rhythm he's built. He goes. The voyage across the Atlantic takes 12 days. He spends most of it in his cabin, seasick, miserable, remembering the crossing 45 years earlier when he was young and eager and believed Paris would make him a great painter. That Samuel Morse was gone, dead longer than some of the passengers on this ship have been alive. Paris hasn't changed, or rather it has completely, but feels the same. The streets are wider now. Haussmann's renovations have transformed the medieval core into boulevards and parks, but the light is the same. That northern European light he used to paint, used to chase through galleries and cafes, used to believe held some secret about art he could capture if he looked hard enough. The ceremony is at the Palais Royal, full diplomatic protocols. The American ambassador is there, French ministers, artists and scientists. A formal presentation in a gilded room that costs more than most painters will earn in their lifetimes. They praise his genius, his contribution to human progress, his transformation of communication. The speech goes on. Translation, response, more speeches. He stands there accepting honours for work he did decades ago, work that killed the thing he actually cared about. The irony is thick enough to choke on. France is honouring him for the telegraph, but the only success he ever had in France was as a painter. The Salon of 1833 that accepted his work, the brief moment when French critics thought he might become something. That's what Paris meant to him, and now Paris is celebrating the thing that ended all that. After the ceremony, there's a reception, more speeches, more introductions. He meets scientists and engineers. They want to talk about telegraph improvements, future developments, potential applications. He nods, agrees, says the right things, but he's not really there. His mind is elsewhere. Walking through the Louvre 45 years ago, standing in front of paintings he'll never equal, feeling young and ambitious and terrified. That fear was better than this comfortable success, this public celebration of a life that went completely wrong. Someone mentions the Louvre, suggests he might want to visit, see the new acquisitions, the rearranged galleries. He makes an excuse. Fatigue from the voyage, the ceremony, his age. The real reason is simpler. He can't face it. Can't walk those halls as the famous inventor instead of the failed painter. Can't see the paintings that used to make him weep with ambition and feel nothing but the weight of what he gave up. The visit lasts a week. Dinners with officials, tours of telegraph installations, meetings with French inventors working on improvements to his system. Everyone wants his opinion, his endorsement, his blessing. He gives it freely, costs him nothing. The telegraph is theirs now. He just invented it. They made it matter. There's one dinner that stays with him, a small gathering at the home of a French scientist, mostly engineers and inventors, technical people. The conversation turns to art. Someone mentions the new impressionist painters, these young radicals showing work the Salon rejects, painting light and colour instead of form and narrative, breaking every rule the Academy teaches. The host dismisses them, calls them incompetent, says they can't draw properly so they hide behind technique, claims they're destroying French painting. Everyone agrees, nodding, laughing, making jokes about artists who can't paint. Morse says nothing, but he thinks about his room in New York, his bad paintings, his attempts to remember skills he lost. He thinks maybe these young painters understand something he's forgotten, that rules are just habits, that technique can be a prison, that sometimes you have to break everything to find what's actually yours. He doesn't say any of this. He's not here as an artist, he's here as an inventor, the famous man who changed the world. His opinions on painting don't matter. Never did. The dinner moves on. The voyage back is rougher than the trip over. Storm in the Atlantic. The ship rolls and heaves. He stays in his cabin, sick, weak, wondering if he'll die at sea. Not afraid exactly, just noting the possibility, the symmetry of it, starting and ending in the same water, the decades between just interval, just the gap between departure and return. He doesn't die, the ship arrives, New York Harbor, the same skyline, the same city. Nothing changed in 3 weeks except him. He's older, tireder, more certain that public life is something he can't do anymore. Won't do. The trip to Paris was the last time. After this, he stays home. His daughter Susan meets him at the dock. She's worried about him. The voyage, his health, the strain of the ceremonies. She wants him to rest, see a doctor, stop pushing himself. He agrees to everything, just wants to be home. Back in his room, back to his paintings. The first thing he does is go upstairs. To the studio nobody enters. The canvases are where he left them. Dust on the frames, the smell of old paint and turpentine. Nothing changed, nothing improved, just waiting. Like they knew he'd come back. He picks up a brush, studies the painting he was working on. A landscape, trees and sky. Basic, elementary. The kind of thing a student would paint. The kind of thing that would have embarrassed him 40 years ago. Now it just is. Just his attempt. Just what he can do. The trip to Paris clarified something. The world wants Samuel Morse the inventor. That's who he is to them. That's who he'll always be. The painter died in 1844 when the telegraph succeeded. Everyone knows this except him. He's been pretending otherwise, pretending he could be both. But you can't. The world doesn't allow it. Success in one thing means death in another. That's the trade. That's what he accepted without knowing he was accepting it. But here's what the world doesn't control. This room, these canvases, these hours. The world can have the inventor, can celebrate him, honor him, pay him. That's fine. That's the bargain. But the room is his. The paintings are his. The struggle is his. And nobody gets to take that. He paints. The canvas doesn't improve. His skills don't return. But the doing is the point, the trying. The refusal to accept that success in one thing means failure in everything else. The telegraph won. Fine, it gets history, it gets fame, it gets the public life. But this private failing, this quiet attempt, this belongs to him. Winter 1871 comes hard. Snow and ice. The room is freezing. He paints in his coat, hands stiff, colours muddy, everything harder than it needs to be. He works around it, adapts, continues, because stopping now would mean the world was right, that the inventor was all he was, all he could be, and he won't give them that, won't accept it. The paintings pile up, bad landscapes, worse portraits, still lifes that miss proportion and light. A decade of work that proves nothing except that he kept trying, that he refused to let success be the end of him, that somewhere under the famous inventor was still a painter, not a good one, maybe never a good one, but a painter nonetheless. His health starts failing. Small things at first, fatigue, weakness, trouble with stairs. The doctor says his heart, says he needs to rest, stop exerting himself, stop climbing to that studio. He nods, agrees, ignores the advice. The stairs are hard but manageable. The room is on the 3rd floor but still reachable. He'll paint until he can't, then he'll stop. Not before. Spring arrives. He's 80 years old. The telegraph is everywhere now. Cables under the ocean. Lines across continents. His invention connecting the world. Messages travelling at the speed of light. Information flowing. Commerce expanding. The modern age built on technology he created. The impact is permanent, undeniable, world-changing. And in a room in New York, an old man paints pictures that don't work. Pictures nobody wants. Pictures that will be forgotten or destroyed. He paints them anyway. Because they're his attempt, his struggle, his refusal to be only what success made him. There's a day in late March, warm for the season, sun through the window. He's working on a painting of the view from his window. Buildings and sky, simple, direct, the kind of thing he used to sketch in minutes when he was young. Now it takes hours, days, and it still doesn't work. The perspective is wrong. The colours muddy, the composition weak. Everything about it fails. He steps back, studies it, sees all the problems, all the ways it doesn't match what he wanted, what he saw, what he tried to capture. The gap between vision and execution is vast, unbridgeable, always was, always will be. But here's what he understands now, what 40 years of success and failure taught him. The gap is the point. The struggle is the point. The trying despite certain failure is the point. Success meant closing that gap, meant achieving what he set out to do, but closing the gap ended the journey, ended the reason to continue, ended the part that actually mattered. The telegraph succeeded, it worked, it changed the world, and in succeeding it became something he could set down, could walk away from, could let others improve and develop and extend. Success meant completion, meant the work was done, meant he could stop. But painting never succeeds, never closes the gap, never reaches the vision. It just tries, fails, tries again, and in that endless trying is something the telegraph could never give him, the freedom to be incomplete. He puts down the brush, not done with the painting, it'll never be done, but done for today, done for this moment. The canvas sits on the easel, bad, unfinished, his, still trying, still failing, still painting, not because it works, because it doesn't, because the not working is what keeps him alive. The end comes quietly, not with drama, not with revelation, just a morning in April when the body decides it's done. April 2nd, 1872. He wakes or doesn't fully wake. The line between sleep and waking has blurred lately. His nephew is there. Charles, always reliable Charles, notices something wrong. The breathing shallow, the colour pale, calls the doctor. Doctor arrives, examines, shakes his head. Nothing to be done. The machine is stopping, parts wearing out. No telegraph message can reverse this. No painting can delay it. The inventor who conquered distance cannot outrun time. He slips away that afternoon, peacefully. No struggle, no fighting. Just a gradual dimming, like a lamp running out of oil. 80 years compressed into a final breath. Then silence. The newspapers carry the story. Front pages across America. The great inventor has died. Samuel Morse, creator of the telegraph. Revolutionary. Genius. The man who changed everything. They list his achievements, the patents, the honours, the money raised, the miles of wire strung, the messages sent, the world connected. They celebrate the inventor, mourn the loss, print his portrait. The official one? Distinguished, accomplished, the face of success. Nobody mentions the paintings. Why would they? Nobody saw them. Nobody cared. They weren't the story, weren't the legacy, weren't what mattered. Just a footnote, a curiosity, something he did before finding his real purpose, before becoming who he actually was. The inventor, the success, the man the world would remember. The funeral is large, dignitaries attend, speeches delivered, tributes read. The telegraph companies send representatives. The scientific community pays respects. Politicians praise his contributions. Everyone acknowledging the loss, the passing of greatness, the end of an era. He's buried in Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn. Proper monument, fitting tribute, name carved in stone. Samuel Finley Breeze Morse, inventor of the telegraph. The words defining him, fixing him, making permanent what he spent 40 years trying to escape. His studio is cleared out. The nephew handles it. Charles sorting through possessions, finding the paintings, dozens of them, landscapes, portraits, still lifes, experiments, failures. He doesn't know what to do with them. They're not good, anyone can see that. Not terrible, just not special. Not worth keeping, not worth selling. Not worth anything really. Some get distributed to family. Most get stored, forgotten, lost, destroyed eventually, water damage, fire, simple disposal. Nobody thinks to preserve them. Why would they? They're not important, not valuable, not the work of Samuel Morse, the real Samuel Morse, the one who mattered. These are just the attempts of someone who didn't exist, someone who never succeeded, someone history didn't need to remember. The telegraph expands, keeps growing. Morse's patents eventually expire, but the technology continues, improves, evolves, more lines laid, more messages sent, the network spreading, covering continents, crossing oceans, connecting everything. By the end of the century, it's ubiquitous, universal, fundamental. The infrastructure of modern civilization, and Samuel Morse is credited, remembered, celebrated, his name attached to this transformation, his invention changing everything, the legacy secure, the impact permanent, the success complete. But here's what gets lost, what the monuments don't mention, what the history books skip, what the legacy papers over. Samuel Morse didn't want to be remembered for the telegraph. He wanted to be remembered for painting, the thing he failed at, the thing that didn't work, the thing he spent his whole life trying to escape, and 40 years trying to return to. The gap between what he achieved and what he wanted is the actual story, not the achievement, the gap. Think about what that means. The man who invented instant communication spent his life unable to communicate what actually mattered to him. The man who connected the world couldn't connect to his own deepest desire. The man who succeeded at everything that made him famous failed at the only thing he cared about. And instead of that failure invalidating his life, it's what made his life real, made it human, made it something more than just a list of achievements and a name in history books. Because success is easy to understand, easy to measure, easy to celebrate. You either achieve the goal or you don't. You either change the world or you don't. You either leave a legacy or you don't. Success has clear boundaries, definite endpoints, obvious markers. This is why we love success stories, why we tell them, why we teach them. They have shape, arc, resolution. They make sense, but failure is different. Failure is messy, open-ended, ongoing. You can fail forever, keep trying forever, keep hoping forever. The gap between vision and execution never closes. The distance between what you see and what you can create never shrinks. You just keep working, keep attempting, keep falling short. And somewhere in that endless falling short is something that success can never provide. The space to be incomplete, the permission to struggle, the freedom to be more than your achievements. Morse understood this. Maybe not at first, not when he abandoned painting for the telegraph, not when success arrived, not during all those years of wealth and fame and recognition, but later, in that studio, with those bad paintings, when he was old and the world had moved on and nobody cared what he did anymore. Then he understood. The telegraph was what he accomplished, painting was what he was, and being is more important than accomplishing, even when being means failing, especially when being means failing. The paintings that survived ended up scattered, museum basements, university storage, private collections of people who didn't know what they had, a landscape here, a portrait there, most unsigned, undated, unfinished. They surface occasionally, get attributed to Morse, get examined, get dismissed, not good enough to exhibit, not bad enough to be interesting. Just mediocre efforts from someone who was briefly a painter before becoming something else, something important, something worth remembering. The paintings themselves forgotten, ignored. Exactly what he feared. Exactly what happened. Exactly what didn't matter. Because the paintings weren't about being seen, weren't about being remembered, weren't about being good. They were about being present, being engaged, being alive in the attempt. The painting itself was irrelevant. The painting was just the excuse, the reason to show up, the reason to try, the reason to fail. What mattered was the trying, the showing up, the refusal to be only what success had made him. And that's not something you can preserve in a museum, not something you can attribute or date or authenticate, not something history can record. We remember Samuel Morse as an inventor. This is correct, accurate, true. He invented the telegraph, changed the world, created something that lasted, something that mattered, something that built the foundation for everything that came after. The telephone, the radio, the internet. The entire modern world of instant communication traces back to his work, his insight, his achievement. The legacy is real, undeniable, permanent. He earned the recognition, deserves the monuments, belongs in history, no question. But he wasn't an inventor, not really, not in the way that defines a person, not in the way that makes a life. He was a painter who invented something, a painter who succeeded at inventing, a painter who spent 40 years trying to return to painting because painting was who he actually was, and the painting failed. The painting was bad, the painting didn't work, and the painting mattered more than the telegraph. To him, in the ways that count, in the measurement that has no scale. This is what we miss when we tell success stories. When we celebrate achievements, when we build monuments to what people accomplished, we miss the person underneath, the one who wanted something else, the one who tried and failed, the one who kept trying despite the failing. We miss the gap between the achievement and the desire, and the gap is where the actual human being lives. Not in what they accomplished, in what they couldn't accomplish, in what they kept attempting anyway. Samuel Morse died successful, wealthy, celebrated, remembered. His invention transforming the world, his name in history books, his legacy secure. Everything society says makes a life meaningful. Everything we're told to strive for. Everything that's supposed to matter. He had it all, achieved it all, accomplished it all. The perfect success story. The American dream realized. The immigrant son who changed the world. And it wasn't enough. Wasn't what he wanted. Wasn't who he was. The paintings rotting in storage rooms tell the truth. The bad paintings. The failed paintings. The paintings nobody wanted. They tell us that success isn't the point. Achievement isn't the point. Legacy isn't the point. The point is the trying, the struggling, the gap between vision and execution, the space where you're not successful, not accomplished, not done, the space where you're still becoming, still attempting, still alive in ways that success kills. He knew this. At the end, in that studio, with those canvases, he knew that the telegraph made him famous, but painting made him real. The telegraph connected the world, but painting connected him to himself. And being matters more than doing, even when being means failing. Especially when being means failing, because failing means you're still trying, still hoping, still reaching for something beyond what you've already achieved. The last painting he worked on probably still exists somewhere. Unfinished, unsigned, unimportant, a view from a window, buildings and sky, simple composition, poor execution, everything wrong with it, everything that marks it as amateur, as unsuccessful, as the work of someone who never quite figured it out, never quite closed the gap, never quite achieved what they were reaching for. And that painting, that failed attempt, that permanent gap between vision and execution, is Samuel Morse's real legacy. Not the one history remembers, the one that actually mattered, the one that made him human instead of just successful. The telegraph changed the world, the paintings changed nothing. The telegraph connected millions. The paintings connected no one. The telegraph worked, the paintings failed. But Morse kept painting, right until the end. Not because it might succeed, because it wouldn't. Because the not succeeding was the point. The gap was the point. The trying despite certain failure was the point. That's what we forget when we tell success stories. That's what monuments leave out. That's what history erases. The person underneath the achievement. The one who wanted something else. The one who kept trying anyway. The one who understood that being incomplete is more human than being accomplished. That struggling is more alive than succeeding.